There it goes. All right. Looks good. All right. Let's go back to here and record. All right. All right. Well, let's see. Let me pull up the comments so I can see comments. Before we get started, we'll roll it out. I haven't done a Soul Speaks 5D in a while. It seems like. Let's see. Okay, boom. Let me pull up YouTube. Watch it on YouTube. Boom. And there we go. Yeah. All right. So it's the we haven't done a lot of in the last 30 days. Haven't done a lot of Soul Speaks 5D, which is out of the ordinary. But we're gonna start doing some while we're here in Sedona. But it's good to have my brother Paul Sims here today. Thanks for coming in, Paul. I'm looking forward to this conversation, talking about your music and talking about whatever comes up. But there's been a lot going on, obviously.
Definitely, yeah. Been a long time since we spoke as well, right?
Yeah, it's probably been a couple of years. But one of the reasons that I reached out to you was a couple of reasons. One, because I saw you putting up more music because I'm subscribed to you on YouTube, and I don't get a chance to listen to a lot of stuff in depthly, but I listened to I think 3 different ones over the last, I'd say the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I've always liked your stuff. I kind of want to get into that, in a bit, like see where you're going with it, what's going on with it. But the other reason that I wanted to talk to you is because there's, if you go back to 2012, I guess if we use that as the line in the sand, what was it, December 21st, 2012 through December 21st of 2022 was 10 years. That 10-year period ended. Certainly seems like we're in a new earth. Kind of, to me, I feel like it started March 1st. But if you go back to 2012 and you go into these communities like Soulology and empath groups and starseed lightworker groups and all that stuff, most of these groups at that time were probably, and I don't know for certain, but I know I'm pretty close, were like 95% female. And obviously the feminine with feminine intuition embodied more of the higher connections. And by virtue of that, they were clued in before what I would consider the apparatus, the physical apparatus of the matrix was the male. And so in those early years, like 2012 through like maybe, I want to say like even into 2019, certainly in the early years, you heard a lot of references to the mother has landed, the divine feminine's here, and then there was a whole evolution that occurred over the years. You could see it through people's writings and so on. Then as time went on, including in Soulology, you started to have more and more men join these groups. And, I'd say it's probably like 70-30 now, maybe 65-35 in some of these groups. But in 2019, there seemed to be like a move, like the masculine energy on the earth made a move and started to remove the veils. And this would include all of us, whether you're male or female. And then that's continued and has really taken on a prominent role, especially this year and the last few months. And so I noticed that, toward the end of last year and the beginning of this year, because I experienced a lot of my experience, obviously, is through the show and through Soulology, that men were coming on and bearing their soul. They were showing a part of them that we hadn't seen or that wasn't accepted, or however you want to put it. You could describe it as men keep their emotions inside and so on. And there was a lot of commentary, a lot of narrative in regard to what was happening. in relationships, what was happening with the masculine, and so on and so on. But I really feel like that it's the masculine has come out, and it's very fresh and very new. I had a seizure. I used to suffer or experience seizures from the age of 15 to 50, probably 150 to 200. I know at least 5 a year. And I was only conscious one time when I was 37 years old during a seizure. And I had a conversation with an angel. It was a choice point for me, and I decided to stay. Well, I had one a couple of months ago, and I talked about it. And it was only for the second time that I was conscious in a seizure. And in that seizure, I was immediately thrown out of my body, shot out of my body, and I was taken to this field of consciousness to receive whatever, I'm about to tell you. And it was two violent oceans that were colliding, and there was no 0 point. They were just colliding. And I noticed immediately that both sides were masculine. And the intel that I got was that the feminine part of us, until that point, was unaware of the masculine, the physical male masculine's role, or the masculine's journey, I should say. And that in that moment, that the coding or the information of that experience was now fully disclosed to the feminine side, and therefore the males, that ocean became one serene body of water, like a glass, a lake, or a pond where it's just glass, right, where it's smooth. And that the war was over, basically, between the man versus the man, so to speak. And so, yeah, that was part of the reason I wanted to get you on, because I have a lot of respect for you. Obviously, Marina is a part of Soulology, and I've known Marina, one of the first people I met, really, back in like 2013 or 2014. And so I know you because we've gotten to know each other, and I just, we can all read energy and the telepathy and everything. I don't know like details of your life or anything, and anything like that, but I just know you, and I know your, because we've talked about it, and I don't think we'd have to talk about it with we just know it in terms of men that, like the women, we've had to go through that brutal honesty of the soul and find our own true self through that evolution. But in observing you and engaging with you and just being, privy to your energy just through the normal course of things, to me, you've always carried something that I see in myself, and I see in other men, the part of us that's kind of been suppressed, the part of us that couldn't come out, through the patterning and the behaviors that were conditioned upon us, if you will. And so, I admire that, because that softness that's very powerful is something that I see in you and other men, and I see it emerging to its full potential as we approach this equinox. So I don't know where I wanted to start with that, but I wanted to tell you that's one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you, because you carry that. And I know we all have work to do. I'm not saying you're walking on water or anything like that, but the fact that part of you has always been present, come hell or high water, come highs or lows, come balance and imbalance. And I think that can be seen in many men. But I just was curious as to, what it's been like for you these last few months since March. Have you gone through a lot of, self introspection and inventory and revisiting and life review type of scenarios, and just, kind of what's your experience been these last few months?
So there's a lot in there what you just said, so I'm digesting that. But there's this thing about, like I kind of said it was the awkward conversation needs to be had. And so the things you really don't want to be saying or talking about, the things that men seem to hide. I've been very much a person that found it very difficult to express emotion, and I had issues with judgment and failure and pain. So I've had to kind of look at it, and to be honest, you think you've dealt with something, and then some other facet comes along and bites you. So you know, it's not. I don't think it's particularly over, but it's certainly been traumatic to kind of relive stuff. And I've broken down a number of times, even recently, and put myself in positions that you think, why did I put myself in that, only to learn something maybe? And so yeah, there's been a lot of that, but the awkward conversation in terms of having to actually face it and talk about it properly, and you know, we're like, we skim things over and then think it's okay, and then you have to actually face it. And I think when you talked about the two kind of from your perspective, when you looked at the seeds clashing, you know, that coming together, the extremes have to come together, because really they're still all mirroring, even if they're opposite ends, they're still mirroring. So yeah, I've broken down a few times, and my thing, even in my own pain and things going on, I've still said, and I've said to Marina, I'm still unstoppable. Even though I feel really vulnerable right now, I'm not stopping. I'm still gonna keep going. And it was kind of recognizing that, you know, whilst you're in your weakest moment, you're actually in your strongest moment. And I kind of keep coming back to that for myself, is that's where you find in yourself all the time, right? That whole self-discovery is constantly going on, where you're looking at yourself in the moments of greatness, of weakness, of you know, even moments of fear, right? Where you kind of think, what is going on? Why on earth did this happen? And I see a lot of different things mirror with you. I remember last year when you know, you had some things going on with Sidonia, and this year it's a different year for you. And yeah, we're all having our different things going on at the same time, or around the same time, and didn't recognize it. So yeah, just being brutally honest with yourself and having to look at that, and it's not going away unless you deal with it. So if I didn't want to deal with it, it's coming to me. And so that's one of the things I definitely can see. But I also see this thing about connecting. I have this massive, overwhelming thing inside me about the world needs to come back together, right? So it's been so disjointed, so disconnected, so meism. You know, my dad often talks about, we've had the different kind of political regimes, right? We've had Nazism, we've had you know, capitalism, but the big one that's been left is meism. You know, it's all about the me. And this whole thing about, actual fact, it's not about me, it's actually all about us. And what are we doing? And how are we reacting? And if we can't connect and work it out, even on a small scale, how on earth can we expect the world to come together as a collective? So I constantly have this thing about unity, and it's an overriding theme that I've seemed to have. I create things all the time, Todd, and I invent things. And my theme throughout them all, I laugh, they're all connectors. They're either electrical connectors that fit on trucks. They're all about connecting things together, bringing things together. You know, I created Library Suite. It's a library to harness and hold a collection of things together to share. So I created this automated library on a software platform, but it's about sharing. So you have this massive, overwhelming thing about people coming together and unifying. is actually quite emotional for me, because I think it's a beautiful thing that we can do that. And despite the human, you coined that expression, I believe, the human is the hero. That really did hit me. The human is the hero, where despite every challenge that we have, regardless of whether we feel we can cope or not, it's actually all possible. We just think it isn't when we're in mind, right? So we think, oh God, that's a wall, I can't do it. Can I go through the wall? Am I going to hit the wall? I'm going through the wall. What is this? Is this a wall? And we're questioning all the time. But ultimately, of course you can. Of course you can always do it. It's not even real. It's just what was in the mind created. But the whole point of when we're given things that we feel are very complex and difficult to actually resolve or fix or have a solution for, there's always a solution, and there's a million ways of doing it, but we always seem to think that we have to follow a certain path, and the universe is always telling you there's a million different ways of doing it. So you kind of get hit with curveballs to tell you it's this way, not that way. And so it's all, again, a discovery and a journey, the mystery, right, of being a human. But what's beautiful about humans are, no matter how complex the problems are and the difficulties we're put in, we are able to find solutions. And the more and more we've been oppressed, externally, internally, with our own programs, the mind is learning, the programs are dying, and the self is actually kind of working that out, that it's actually all possible and we can find solutions. And the reason we can do that is because now we're working together and we're opening up. So I'm very privileged. I come in contact with a lot of innovations, and I'm telling you, they're incredible. And you think, wow. And man is bringing these things together. Even though we've got pollutants, we've got damage going on, it's pushing us into the corner to actually find the solutions, to create and find solutions. So the waves are still battering about a bit, but the solutions are coming, the coming togetherness is coming, and the answers are coming. Without the opposite, you can't get the solution. So the solution is coming because we keep getting battered, whether it's doing it ourselves to ourselves, or whether it's what's happening in the collective. It's, they call it the sea of mankind, don't they? Because it's waving and tossing about, it doesn't know where it wants to go. And until it comes to that point of the awkward conversations, or whether it's the resolve, or whether it's the acceptance, whatever it is that needs, it then comes to that point where it can actually start working. And that is, I think if we were all angels looking down and we're watching that happen, that is an amazing, beautiful thing to see, right?
Yeah.
All these crazy humans.
All these crazy humans. I think we have the utmost respect now. I think we've gained some respect.
Yeah.
Well, no, what you say though, it's because I always try to equate it to well, what does that mean? Layman's terms for the human consciousness as we stand at this point in our evolution. And I just said it on the last show, but I've always felt that the last line of separation is masculine and feminine. And so being that we're physical representations of that, and having an external experience of our internal cycle of resurrection or cycle of rebirth, whatever you want to call it, is that people talk about, or they have mentioned before, the battle of the sexes is over, or something to that effect, right? Particularly as time has gone on. And I just started to see it because it was a bit frustrating to me to have to face this last line of separation through the relationship of the masculine and the feminine in form. And then it dawned on me, what do the two have in common? Well, the two have both incarnated into a realm that we might call patriarchal, which has nothing to do with masculine or feminine more than one than the other. One was the victim and one was the apparatus, if you could look at it that way. And if you wanted to call it victimizer and one's a victim, you could say that too, I guess, because I mean, the men were the ones that went to war historically and et cetera. We could give many examples. They're more powerful in terms of physical prowess and so on. But I came to the conclusion that how do you, if I'm, for instance, in my own case, if I'm to be a balanced masculine and feminine, therefore seeing both from an equal perspective, how can I bring equilibrium? And it came to me that through what you're talking about, through having these uncomfortable, necessary discussions, certainly makes sense to me that they have to happen with the inner masculine, inner feminine within myself. And in that conversation, realizing that what can we both hang our hat on? It's not on the differences and oh, well, this side needs to be more empathic. This side needs to be this side needs to be that. And that old battle continues, but one in which I recognize, hey, my masculine, my feminine, and therefore every male, every female, in form and the energetic field itself has been subjected to the patriarchal. So it's not about, for me, disengaging or distancing from the gender that I feel less identified with, but to take both of the sides that make me up and to extract myself from the patriarchal.
Yeah.
So that no longer is the dialogue one of me versus you, masculine versus feminine, but one of, hey, let's extract ourselves from this illusion so that we can focus on our, you could say God-given abilities and really the purpose for, this, whatever thousands of lives that we've had to come to this point that's been written about for, thousands of years. But and I think, for me, what you said was right on for me, because it took this internal dialogue where both were equally represented, but ultimately unified in their perspective, from both sides of the house, unified in the effort to understand it, unified in understanding it, and unified in acting, from that point of unified awareness to create in unity.
See, the first woman we ever loved was our mum, right? But that depends on how that worked as well, because so we got programs running on how we saw a woman. I had a very strong mum. My mum was of a very strong personality. I mean, really strong. Funny, she was one of 15 children. My dad was the only child. My mum comes from a German background. My dad came from part, if you like, Jewish or certainly English. And we had the extremes. It was almost like if I chose my parents, I chose the two extremes. One was very poor. My grandfather used to poach rabbits to sell the skin for bread, and then they used to have rabbit stew. Whereas my dad went to private school, and his father worked at Harley Street, and they had a different life. So I came to learn the extremes, and clearly some of those extremes that I learned from my mum's side were not great. But then that perceived that was okay. So now my program ran that I could accept certain things from a woman as normal when they weren't. And then the man in me would act a certain way, and that should be okay. So guess what? I found myself in an abusive relationship, and I wondered why. And then I woke up at 40 and then realized, I was in a totally manipulated world that wasn't even real. And as I left it, I was broken. oh, I felt I was broken because I didn't even know, I couldn't even talk to you, Todd, because I would have believed that anybody outside this religious cult was demon controlled. And I couldn't even trust my own thoughts because I already thought that I was already under the demon's control. And then I had I came out of that and came out of a relationship, and then went and looked at myself, and I saw the film The Yes Man, which is really random, with I forgot his name now, the comedian.
Jim
And
Carrey.
Jim
Yeah.
Carrey. And what it was I had all my life, I had said, no, I can't have a girlfriend. I can't have a birthday. I can't have a Christmas present. I can't have a friend who's not in the cult. None of my relationships or anything could work outside that. And then all of a sudden I was 40 and said, yes, you can. And do you know what? You're going to go and do it now. Even though it frightens you to death, I'm going to go and do what frightens me. And
Right.
I had to go through that scare point. And my mum passed in that year. I was divorced in that year. I'd let go of the religion I thought I had, and then it was still in my head. So I think probably I'm 12 years on from there, and I've pretty much cleared 90%, 99% of that belief system. What was it? It was just what someone taught me.
Mm.
But my perception of the woman in that arrangement was also that the woman's got a role that is below the man.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what crazy, they all believe in angels. Angels don't even have a sex. So why are we all sudden saying that, we're more than, and this has got to be this way? So it was undoing all of that nonsense. And, you learn through things not working right, and you learn through actual fact. It's an interesting thing. There was a scripture that says that even though he was the Christ, he learned through the things he suffered.
Right.
And sometimes, right, we go through pain, but we go through pain that we cause ourselves to learn something from it. At the time, it don't feel great, and it feels like it's the worst point of your life. But it's at that point that you're actually going to learn something pretty life-changing. And we seem to have more of that, and then it gets lighter and lighter. But it just seemed these recent months, it was like a resurgence of that, to kind of go, wow, I didn't realise I still had that aspect in me, and I still didn't realise I was being like that. I wasn't as considerate as I could be. I wasn't as thoughtful. And they talk about the rib that came from Adam that went to Eve. Well, men and women grow ribs. It's one of the bones that grows back all the time. So there's no rib loss. It's symbolic. The woman holds the elements that we want. That's why a man loves a woman, because there's elements about the woman that men actually love and want and feel they need. But the more and more complete you are, the more and more you'll become more embracing of that you haven't got, which is the feminine side, right? But it's all taught that it was, separation, but it's not. It's all us.
Right.
And I saw something the other day that blew me away. The picture of Jesus at the Last Supper. He sits at the table, and Michelangelo does a picture. I didn't realise, but to the if I was looking at you now, it would be to my right sits Mary Magdalene in the picture.
Right.
But most people just say they just saw the disciples; they never saw the woman there.
Right.
And in the scripture, it says that the man, it's all Jesus is talking about, the man that as he reaches for the bread. And then bread is quite symbolic. It's talk about hope, and then there's a promise, which is interesting, the reaching for bread. But the woman that's to his right, she's actually got, it talks about whoever's his hands is by her is going to be my betrayer. So we always thought, oh, that's going to be Judas Iscariot that's betraying her. But it's actually not. It's actually The woman is the one that's her hands are near Jesus, and it's the woman that was betrayed. So the feminine, Michelangelo, very interestingly, has put it in a picture that the woman has actually been betrayed.
Right.
The feminine had been lost, right? So condemned as dark and as dirty and as evil, and it wasn't, right? It was just mistreated. But when you go to the British museums and you go to the museums around the world, have a look at all the female goddesses.
Right.
All their faces are defaced. If you go to the British Museum, you look at all the Egyptians, you look at all the female goddesses, all their faces are defaced. So like they didn't want us to see that. So that whole energy has been totally warped. And what's beautiful is that it's been in plain sight, right? In pictures, in museums, for years. And we're kind of coming round to going, hang on, yeah, we have got to get the balance back. They've got the elements that we love and want, but we've been suppressing them in ourselves. So now we're allowed to open up and express them in our own way, and it's okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's
Yeah.
a good point, because there's a lot of, over the years, a lot of talk about, and obviously it's true, the suppression of the feminine energy, which, because of our human experience and our over identification with being a, let's just say, less or no consideration for our multidimensionality, we look at it, oh, I'm a man, that's a woman. And when you really think about it, if you think about, for instance, what is it that women will say about men? Well, men don't open up, right? So why is that? Because the patriarch, the program, which again has nothing to do with masculine or feminine, purposely suppressed the feminine energy. And what does that look like with women? Well, it looks like the brutality of, being burned at the stake and raped and misogyny and just different things. But what does it look like in a man? It's again, if we can get past the superficial and look at the energetics behind it, what have we suppressed? Maybe one was on the outside, it looked like they were suppressed, while the other one was an inner suppression. But either way, we've suppressed as a whole. The other thing I really like about what you're saying is the learning through the trials and the tribulations. And where do those trials and tribulations come? If we look at the incarnations that we've had, typically where do they come? What does that look like? And again, it is the interaction, in general, because masculine and feminine. So where we've had X's and we've had this and that, I think we can start to look at these past experiences for the gold that they offer. Because if we, that's right, they're like the whetstone on a knife. You're sharpening it, and it's come through that friction. Now, the other thing I'd say, I've noticed this. Now, it's happened to me, and I believe even Marina made reference to it the other day. I know several other people. I reunited with my mother after 6 years of no contact at the end of May. And, obviously at the human level, that's a very nice story. That's a great story. But I look deeper than that. It's as the individual goes, so goes the collective. So if you look at a man or a woman, a daughter or a son, I'm not saying it's 100%, but even in the light worker circles, if you ask people about their journey, how many of them had a mother issue? Because as we all know, whether it's us or somebody else, when people are not in a good state, who do they project on? They project on those closest to them, and there's nobody closer to us than the mother. So I feel like that it's a great sign that so many people are coming into reunification with their mother. And that as that has occurred, and I guess you could say when that occurs, that shows to me a real equilibrium in the field. Because if you're in equilibrium with your mother, then, and that would include whether you're having, they say it takes two, but in this quantum field now, it's all us, right? So what I'm saying is that when you have that equilibrium, how can there be any imbalance? Period. I mean, how can there be any imbalance? Because that's really, like you said earlier, that was your mother universe, basically, and so if you're good with the goddess, so to speak, if you're good with the mother, which to me is what I call source, then everything else is going to be good. Now, it may take a little time in the physical experience, but we know that the time that lapses between energetic force or energetic occurrences, they will show up in the physical. We all know that, and the time that lapse is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So I see it as a real positive sign, especially with this equinox.
Well, I also see in my family growing up, I perceived my father as angry. So, and yet what it wasn't anger. He was just frustrated because he wasn't in this religious cult. So he was seeing his family that he felt being ripped apart and couldn't experience all the stuff that he used to be able to have, the birthdays and things. So he used to get quite frustrated with it. But my mum, would be in the dominant personality, was, for me, when I was growing up, was not so angry. She was caring and loving and kind. But do you see, there was also interesting play here in that I had a perception as a child that I carried till I was 40, that my dad was an angry man, and that my life as a child wasn't quite fair. And so my mum was the kind one. But interestingly, in the twist, my mum was manipulating. She wouldn't talk to you if you didn't obey. She would constantly put the fear of God in me to get what I needed to do, what she felt I needed to do. My dad's reaction wasn't positive into that. It was more the man thing to get angry. And I'm the child learning stories now that it's okay to be a manipulator, but it's okay to get angry if you're not happy. And between them, there's conflict, right? Because now, if I don't like something, at one point I'm either going to be angry, or the other point I'm going to be a manipulator. So which bit's okay? Well, none of it. So I'm learning that the imbalance between the male and the female is totally carrying me a story. So I hit 40, have this what the hell, and then I'm going, I'm reacting like that. Why am I reacting like that? That's not very loving. Right, okay. Well, I'm reacting like this now. Yeah, but that's a little bit devious, isn't it? And why are you trying to get someone to do what you want them to do? Because you think that that's what is love. Love doesn't do that. And so it kept bringing me back. And I was then experiencing it with my own children, who are going to me, well, you taught me to be like this. So they're repeating the cycle, but now they're teaching me because they're doing it to me. So now I was doing it to other people and my kids are doing it to me. I'm going, well, why are they doing it? Well, it's because I'm doing it. I taught them. So I've got to take the responsibility that I taught them. I've got to take the responsibility that that was a story. And guess what? It's not even real. It's just something that I grew up with and thought that it was okay. So I've got to rewrite history and say, do you know what? Even in certain circumstances, I was brought up in London. There was kind of rough areas, right, in London. And I went to school in Dagenham. It's kind of like really quite a hard area. And there's certain things that I did in terms of behaving, thinking you have to survive, right? Because if you don't, you're going to be in hospital. So you grow up with that kind of environment. And yet you have the twisted thing saying, I'm going to behave like that, then go and pretend I'm going to be like this at this kind of meeting and this congregational thing. But outside of that, you're in survival. And then your mum and dad are acting like this and you're acting like this. And so you become, what are you? You're an incredible piece of equipment that's absolutely no benefit to nobody. And then you hit this point where you have to say, that has to stop. It's not healthy. Yeah. But they're all the stuff that we were all taught. we were all taught that was normal and it's okay. And that we have to undo. So yeah, but self-discovery. And I think that's the beautiful thing. So in it all, I remember having a meditation and I just said, can you show me what I look like? And I saw this beautiful diamonds kind of light shining and beautiful facets. And I had a very emotional moment when we did this kind of three-way or two-way experience with Source. And there was a couple of major things come out. One was mankind's greatest fear is his potential. And that blew me away.
His own power, her own power.
Yeah. And I just went, wow. And then I asked, well, what do you see? And I got, I see beautiful, beautiful stars, beautiful light. And I'd never seen myself as that. So if I don't see myself as that, how on earth can I see anybody else like that? Because unless you see it in yourself, you can't see it in others, right? So there's been some moments that have been almost like power breaking points, emotional breakthroughs. And yet, isn't it funny that the biggest powerful thing that you experience in your life is that random act of kindness? Like, you didn't expect anything, you don't think you're worth anything, and you're walking around, and then someone does some beautiful, wonderful gift of kindness for you. You didn't ask for, you didn't expect. And here they were, they just thought of you and they just wanted to share something beautiful with you. That throws you out, doesn't it? Does that not just... I remember at 40, somebody gave me my very first birthday cake. And I hadn't realised for 40 years, I'd never celebrated the fact that I was even born. That was massive. That I wasn't even alive. I had never celebrated the fact that I was alive. And it was never allowed. So to have someone come along and say, oh, I thought of you today, for it's your birthday, here's a birthday cake. I'd eaten it. And then about a day or two later, I'm driving on the M25 around London and I had to pull over. I just broke down. It was the most beautiful gift given to me that I never even expected. And I just went, random acts of kindness are the most powerful thing. And I think there's our breakthrough, right? Is the gifts that we can give to each other. The biggest gifts we can give to each other is just that random act of kindness.
Yeah.
How, you know, you read it, you see it, you go, wow.
Well, and then too, like, because it's, because I guess the easiest way to say it is because we're in a quantum field now. For me, it's like, well, if you look at the old, I guess you would say the old paradigm, or which was, the vehicle was codependency, right? Of some degree or another. We all know this. And we're still in it. Every time we pay taxes, every time we listen to a lawless law or whatever other bullshit there is, right? But it kind of like when there's two sides in a conflict, you're talking about these random acts of kindness, and I totally agree with you. That, for instance, it doesn't matter where the projection starts. It just matters where you're at. And there's no difference between being the first one to send a shot across the bow, or if you're the one that sends a shot across the bow and your excuse is someone sent one to me. The random act of kindness, to me in the quantum field, is to be responsible and accountable for yourself, which is tied to the self-love that you're alluding to, and being able to step back, step away, take a breath, whatever the case is, and, stand in your power. That's, to me, like it's an act of kindness for ourselves, because I think, when it comes to what you're talking about, and, we're totally here. I mean, the Soulspeaks, the downloads with the network over the years has all been about paying it forward and equal distribution, equal energy exchange. But ultimately it is an act of kindness. And so, just as our distorted conditioning, projections, and external actions, words, thoughts, whatever, not only did they perpetuate the old paradigm, but they also expanded what was there. But now that we've kind of entered this other field, I just try to keep in mind, it's these acts of kindness, if you want to call it that, where I give credence to the I am that I am. And nobody has to know. Nobody probably will know. It's like they say about integrity. Integrity is when you do the right thing, especially when nobody's looking. Well, nobody's looking at any of us.
No.
Because it's in our, it's in us. It's internal, it's eternal. It's a dialogue, if you will, of the big Todd and the little Todd. Nobody's privy to that conversation. Nobody knows my truth but me. And I feel like that if we have a common truth of divinity and eternal beingness, that we've reached a point now that not only can we sustain that point of awareness, but we can activate this quantum field in the same contagious way that the distorted was,
So what's really interesting is that in my own personal life, my dad lives with me now. He's been with us for about five years plus. My dad's 94, diabetic, but we don't really need all the drugs now because it's mainly dealt with diet, and he does very well. He's mainly vegan and he doesn't really know it because he doesn't know the difference in the non-meat. But his digestive system's really good. He's not having any heavy meats in him. He's really looked after. But the beautiful thing is, my dad is my gift, because where I had the distorted view of my dad, of the angry man, I realized he's the most loving man I know. And that as a child, I didn't get to appreciate that because I only saw it from a child's point of view. But now I am the man, I can see and unwrite the old story. But of course, my mum's not with me in physical form, but certainly she's here in spirit. And so that also means if I'm right with my dad now, I'm also right with my mum, because my mum loved my dad, and my dad loved my mum. I mean, my dad was married to her 56 years and he cries about her still. He misses, loves her. 11 years since she's gone, he still misses and loves her. And a song will come on and he made us all cry. A few months back, he cried the Unchained Melody for my mum, and it was the most beautiful thing to see a 94-year-old man singing to his wife that's not here.
Wow.
It was, we were all crying. The girls were all crying. It was beautiful because that was love, right? That was someone showing you who doesn't really understand the spiritual thing. He doesn't. But he's learning about stuff and he's talking about stuff and we're expressing stuff. And there he just sings his heart out to his wife, his dead wife that he loves. And he still gets to feel her around him. So he's getting the energy. And I went, there you are, there's the unity, right? Even if we're past, we can still have the unity and everything's now. In that quantum field, it's all now. So we've rewritten things. And I always think about Eckhart Tolle, always kept saying, stay in the present, stay in the present. And you kind of think, well, that's okay saying that, but I'm busy working, I'm busy doing stuff. But it's a practice, right? To practice being present is not something that we were trained to do. We were trained to be in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that, you know, there's a whole process. I think we've had that. Do you remember going through the process of rage inside you that had to come out? Did you have that a few years back? Where you had like
I had it in really, I would say, like certainly, well, in the years leading up, and I'd say the build up to 2012, like the 2 or 3 years before, maybe, and then probably, you know, in my own understanding, I'd say it probably played out at 2013, 2014.
I'm a late developer, right? So, so I had
Well,
my
I'm not,
brain.
and I could be, you know, I'm just saying in my own right. Now I would have people that might disagree with that. But that's, you know, that's my honest answer.
I suppose it's a bit like we've been in the sea and there's rocks underneath the sea, and each rock is a little bit higher than the other. So you deal with one thing and then you kind of go along, and then there's another rock that seems to appear out, and you deal with that one and there's another one. And so you're on this kind of journey as you're traveling on your boat, which is yourself. And so you're learning with guilt, you're learning with failure, you're learning with suppression, you're learning with anger, you're learning with rage, you're learning then
Yeah.
the outcome of those awful cycles of we know we've lived in is love and harmony and peace and tolerance and understanding and wisdom. But at the time, they just feel like rocky roads and rocky, you know, feelings. But
Yeah.
again, you know, they say that's how a pearl's made, isn't it? A pearl is made because of the irritation that goes inside, and it creates this beautiful pearl. So as much as we can get things come along to hit us, they're actually shining us up a little bit more, buffing up that little bit more of an edge, making us a little bit more shinier, a little bit
Yeah.
more personable, a little bit more loving, you know, a little bit more shiny and acceptable, you know. And that's really who we are. We are all
Yeah.
pearls.
Yeah. And that was my point earlier about the
Yeah.
whole, you know, even if you look back at the let's just say the masculine versus masculine, or the masculine versus feminine, where we look at all these war stories, you know, be it in the business world or, you know, in a relationship. But I don't, for me anyway, I don't feel that, and I don't want to, I don't feel that there is the next step in it. I feel like that if I see my experiences as I just described, as lesser than, then it's going to impede my expansion.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's very important that all of the journey, all of the players be held in the same reverence as I have for myself, which is ultimately the only way it can be. So the idea is to, how do I increase, you know, my respect, my love for myself, and so on, because it's going to extrapolate out to those playmates and, you know, experiences and memories. But yeah, I feel like it's really important what you said about the pearl. It's the same thing I was saying about the knife sharpening, you know,
Yeah.
honing a knife on a whetstone, or a diamond, you know, from coal or whatever. But
We're
yeah, I
doing it
feel,
still. And
go
we're
ahead.
doing it now, right?
Yeah.
Because um you and I are in conversation and we're sharpening each other's understanding and sensory values and views as we're talking. So, you know, when there's two people coming together and they're exploring those things, you are sharpening that up.
Yeah.
I'm taking in your words and digesting that as you're saying
Right.
that. Wow, that's an important point. And maybe, you know, you're doing the same. So they talk about by iron sharpens itself. You know, diamonds, you can't cut a diamond unless you have another diamond, right? So they have those diamond drills to cut things because they work so well. So yeah, we need that in each other. And I think as a community, that's what you're creating. I think I got to be honest, I think that is a beautiful, always been a beautiful thing to see, is that regardless of male, female perspectives, and there still can be playing out, there still can be, people acting in certain ways, and that's fine. But the community of bringing people together is the key, because
Yeah.
we might have to have the awkward conversation with each other. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But at least we're in the same sandbox.
But yeah, and we're saying, do you know what? I didn't see that about myself, and thank you for, maybe I need to see that. So that I see as a beautiful thing, which Solid is doing, bringing that together. And that's grown so differently to when we spoke. Cool.
Yeah.
2 years back, right? We were talking about how things could look and how that was put together. And look at it now.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I'm trying to. I'm so tired I can't even look at it.
So is that not interesting that the actual, so Sology was something you created, right? So you was clearly given, the information, the data's chucked out into the ether. We use the internet to communicate now, but if you imagine the Ethernet
Right.
has the data in it, right? And you've pulled it out and said, you know what, I'm going to run with that thought and I'm going to make it into something. Thoughts create, you've created Sology. But in your creation, the biggest thing that we get from our creating is our journey.
Yeah.
Because our journey is our self-discovery.
Yeah.
And it's teaching us more about how much we should really appreciate what we've done. We should really be, thankful and love more and more about ourselves for the things that we've allowed ourselves to do, because clearly Spirit's directed it. You're running with the information. And in between, it's like going down this road and we're trying to find the end point, but it's never the end point. That's what I always say, it's always the journey, right? Because it's the journey bit that is the most fascinating bit. But most people say, oh, I want to be a multi-millionaire and a multi-billionaire. Well, you've missed the point. It was the journey that made you who you are is the important bit.
Yeah, that's it.
Do you know what I mean? Are you that godlike thing, or are you just a manifestation of money? What are you?
Yeah, it's like well, that's what I'm saying. When the journey's held in the reverence of unity or oneness or grace or whatever you want to call it, then the present takes care of itself. I apologize. I can't believe we just talked for an hour. We didn't even talk about your music. We'll have to do something here in the next few weeks, though, because of the things that the network's doing. And there's not enough of me to go around right now. And so these next 10 or 12 days, we're going to try to pull some together and, and get some more people involved to take on certain aspects of it, so we can kind of cultivate the I guess you would say the creative part of it, which to me music is a big part of it. I intended to talk about your music in part, but I think about it now, like where this line of questioning and conversation would go, we'd need at least an hour, because I want to get into the guts of it, because I feel like it's important in terms of encodement. Because of what is the motivation, what is the inspiration, what are you thinking, what are you doing? Because I know that it falls in line with what you're talking about today. I just know it does. But I'll reach out to you. It might take me a few weeks, but we'll definitely do this again.
No, I appreciate your time, and I know you're doing a great thing. So just keep going, Todd. For me, to you, all I would say is, please, please, please don't stop.
I'm not going to stop.
Good.
I'm not going to stop till I drop.
That's the idea, right?
But I'm not going to drop.
Good.
All right, man.
All right.
Take care, brother. I love you. Thank you.